started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
What do you got?
Go
All
for it.
right. Well, Ryan is a nice man. A very, very nice man. And that's a little inside joke because when he showed up here and he had the goatee and everything and he was kind of hipster and everything. But he wrote a book that's online. What's the name of the book?
Well, it's called A Course in Tranquility.
Okay. And it was a collection of recollections over the years.
Yeah, lessons, I guess.
Yeah, and it was so honest and so sweet. Just ways to be helpful, how family can all participate in what he wants to share and all that. And I fell in love with him. So, welcome. Thank you.
What was the name of the book?
A Course in Tranquility. It's on my blog at the moment. It will be in print.
Okay. The whole book is on your blog?
The whole book, yeah.
Okay.
All 14 lessons. So. All right.
Oh, I've seen some of them.
Yeah, I think I've probably forwarded it to you.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. We're going to take a little different spin on things today. I'm a Kriya Yoga practitioner, and Kriya Yoga, it's not Hatha Yoga, like getting in the postures. It's yoga as it's meant to be practiced, which is for the purpose of being an effective, aware, awake, decent human being. All right? So we have a lot of talk about self-inquiry and what is the self, and this is real and this is not real, and that's fun. All right, we can talk about that forever. And I've read all the books. I'm a big fan of Ramana Maharshi. One of the books that Ramana Maharshi actually read a lot before his ashram developed was Vasishtha's Yoga. And so after he had his awakening experience, he ran away to the cave. He actually meditated and read this book, Vasishtha's Yoga, and a few others. And the great thing about this book, Vasishtha's Yoga, is that it's about that thick, and this is the abridged version. It's one of the longest Sanskrit, it's one of the longest books in the world, but it's written in Sanskrit. And the whole point of this gigantic book is that all of this is the infinite consciousness. All of this is one thing, right? So we get that. We don't need to talk about that anymore, right? And when it talks about enlightenment, it says that that's just a word. You can talk about states, you can talk about enlightenment, you can talk about all these things, but when it comes down to it, that is just a word. But if we are going to talk about enlightenment, the point of it is not to escape this reality, and it's not to go off into la-la land or be in bliss all the time. It's to live a natural and spontaneous life contentedly. A natural and spontaneous life contentedly. Which means you can be sitting here right now, you're listening, that's appropriate, you're content. So what we're aiming for is not to escape from anything. It's really to be just appropriate and okay with who you are as this individualized expression of the infinite consciousness. That's it. Once you can get that, you're fine. Now, the Kriya Yoga path, in the non-dualistic circles, there's this idea that if you just figure out what you are, I am, what is this I, and on and on and on, that you don't need these other things, like breath awareness, mantra practice, anything else that's outlined in traditional yogic texts. But what we have to remember is that it is much easier to be at peace and to realize yourself if you are psychologically healthy. It's much easier to be at peace and be happy if your body is as strong and as healthy as it can be. So Hatha Yoga, you do Hatha Yoga, why do we do that? We do that to be fit. We do that so we're not complaining about aches and pains, so that we can live a happy, long life. Why do we meditate? Why do we practice pranayama? Well, you don't need spirituality to see that when they take meditation into prisons, that there is change that occurs within the consciousness of these prisoners. That when you recommend meditation for someone who's going in for heart surgery, that they have better recovery time. So meditation, I think it's a bunch of crap to say just get rid of it, because it is actually a practice that is very good for all of us. And I look at it just like taking a shower. I think all of you here probably took a shower or something. I can tell by we have some wet heads here. And why do we do that? Because You'll be much healthier. You'll smell better. And you'll just feel better about yourself every day you take a shower. It's the same thing with meditation. If you just set aside 10 to 20 minutes to sit down, to focus on the breath, to be still, your day will go much better. Your day will go so much better. When I discovered meditation, it just changed my life. Not drastically. It wasn't like I woke up one morning and bam, here I was. Well, I guess that's what happens. But over the last 12 years of realizing that there are people in the world who have done this, and they have organized their consciousness, they have organized their life, and they're much happier, healthier, more effective. If you want to be that way, that's great. I wanted that because I wasn't that way. And so over the last 12 years, I would make myself get up every morning and meditate, even though I didn't know what I was doing. I sat down, I looked at a camera. Or not a camera, there's the camera. I looked at it. It's okay. There was the camera. I'm meditating on the camera.
Spontaneous.
Yeah, spontaneous, right? It was a candle, similar, a flash. And I was terrible at it, you know. I would just sit there and force myself to stare at this candle, and for 7 minutes I was just not doing it very well. But I kept going, and I kept going, and I kept going. And eventually, someone introduced the book, this was towards the end of college, Autobiography of a Yogi to me. Any of you familiar with that book?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I got this book, I read it, I saw what drew me in were the fantastic stories, right? You know, all these saints and these sages and the wonderful things that happened. That's what drew me in. That's what draws a lot of people in. And then I started realizing that the point wasn't all these fantastic stories, it was the message behind these stories. And then I started realizing that there were people on this planet that if they applied certain principles, they realized something deeper. And so I asked the yoga teacher who introduced me to it if she could initiate me into this practice, because the tradition is you have a teacher, you're sincere, they know that, they initiate you into the practice, and then you practice on your own. And that's how it goes. And so I met Roy Eugene Davis, who is a disciple of Yogananda's. He's still alive, he's in his 80s. He studied with Yogananda towards the end of Yogananda's life. And Roy, do any of you know Roy? Yeah.
Where's he based?
He's based out of Lakemont, Georgia. So he's not too far away. But I don't have a picture on that book. But he is, like I said, he's in his early 80s now. He is the classic, clean-cut, 50s, suit and tie kind of guy. And I show up just out of college. My hair's longer than it is now. My jeans were all ripped up. It was the grunge era, so I had my flannel shirt on. And I read this stuff, and I fell in love with just the process that you could do these practices, and this would happen. The first thing I said to him when we started talking, I said, when can I learn to teach this stuff? And he just looked at me, and he patted me on the back, and he said, give it about 5 years. I said, okay. Because for me, this was important. And so, sure enough, every year after that, I asked him, well, can I be ordained now? Can I teach now? And he would say no. I would ask him again, and I would say, well, how do I know when I'm ready? And he would say, when you're mentally, emotionally, and spiritually mature. I said, well, what does that mean? He says, you'll know when you know. So then on the 4th year, I decided, all right, I am. I just decided I must be mentally, emotionally, and spiritually mature. But I didn't ask him about it anymore. And then that next year he said, so are you ready to be ordained? And that was 5 years, exactly 5 years later. So that picture that you all saw of me when my hair was short and whatnot, that was right after my ordination back in 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. So after that, I started reading the Yoga Sutras, Vasishtha Yoga, the Bhagavad Gita. And these are all yogic texts which speak to the process of meditation, but more specifically of living in a way that allows you to be happy and healthy. And one of the things that goes on between Roy and I, we never talk about meditation. We never talk about the self. We never talk about altered states of consciousness, healing, none of that. When we get together, he tells me about working on the farm when he was in Ohio, way back in the day, or what he saw on the tractor channel, whatever it might be. So we talk about things like that. And what I have found is that when you are in the presence of someone who is just clear and there, it rubs off on you. It's communication beyond language. And then when you're in that presence, you get a sense of it. And if you can remember it, when you go to practice, you can remember that, and then it starts to rub off on you too. So it's less about the words, and it's more about just embodying that state of consciousness. And one of the best things Roy ever told me was, he said, if people would pay their bills, eat their vegetables, exercise, meditate, and love God, it would be perfect. That's all. If they would just do that, the world would be so much better. And that was good for me, because I was into thinking about, oh, what's the self? What am I? I must not be me. But that's the thing. We're all it anyway, so we don't need to talk about that anymore. Basically, I just want to reinforce the idea that if you're unhappy, just look at those basic things in your life. Are you hanging around people that are supportive of you? If you're unhealthy, think about taking up a hatha yoga practice, or eating your vegetables, eating less meat, whatever it might be. If you have problems with money, I know there's a lot of secret lovers in here. I think that's great for some people, but some of you know I'm a Vedic astrologer, and what I have found as a Vedic astrologer is that there are some people that can do that. It's in their chart. It's natural to them. They read The Secret, bam, they get stuff. There are other people, they don't have that ability to sit down and manifest stuff. They actually have to get a job, work, pay their bills, do investments, these sorts of things. It's true. There's the idea that follow your bliss and money will follow. Really it's follow your bliss and some money will follow. Right? So we have to remember that, because if your bliss is making candles, and unless you have a business plan that you're going to go out and make a business out of making candles, you're not going to make that much money. So anyway, the key is just to keep it very, very simple, very practical. And as far as the deep stuff, have your books, have your scriptures that you read, that maybe once a day it helps to expand your mind. And then you try to apply those as best you can throughout the day. And the more you do that, the more it becomes part of you. And then eventually one day you're like, oh, well, this is it. That's it. I was talking to Nick yesterday, and this is the question I always ask people that are known to be awake and enlightened. I asked Roy this. I said, you know what? Sometimes I sit around and I think, this is it. This is it. There's nothing else. This is it. And he looked around and said, yeah, this is pretty much it. And that was it. and the same thing with Nick. We were talking yesterday, and there were these deep thoughts going on. And I don't know what happened. I said, well, so this is it. He said, yeah, this is it. All right, how many more times do I need to hear that before I finally just accept it? This is it. So, meditate for the stress reduction benefits. Find a technique that works for you. And then just like with self-inquiry, you want to do self-inquiry too, but just like with self-inquiry, the point of meditation is not to crank out as many mantras as you can, or to do as much breath awareness as you can. It's to do the technique until you are calm. And then just sit there, being calm. Watching, waiting. Watching and waiting. Ramana Maharshi, he said if people would just basically sit still and be quiet long enough, they would wake up. Right? So meditation is the way that allows you to neutralize all this chatter. And of course we can say, well, who's hearing the chatter? Well, it's really hard to sit there and be in the middle of the chatter when you can't get any detachment from it. And sometimes, at least I've found, that doing alternate nostril breathing, mantra, it allows me to get that distance so I can say, that's not me. And I really feel it. It's not just a mental concept, right? It's an experience. And the more times you have that experience, the easier it gets. So we have to remember that the yogis, the people who wrote the Yoga Sutras, they had years and years of developing this science. And I see it as like it's mechanical. It's the mechanics of the universe. So it works a certain way. You do this, this happens. And Nick was saying yesterday that he's seen so many people who practice like energetic techniques or practice these things, and it's 40 or 50 years later, and they still don't know what's going on. And I totally agree with them. But to be honest, I've also gone to self-inquiry retreats where the same thing happens. So it's not so much the specific path. It's are they doing it with attention? So any of you who are musicians here, if you've tried to master an instrument, You know, you're trying to learn the scales, but you're watching TV or you're talking to your spouse, you're not going to become a very good musician. You have to pay attention to what you're doing. When you're playing the notes, you listen to the notes. You hear the rhythm, you feel the rhythm, you give yourself fully to it. And I have to admit, most of my profoundest spiritual experiences were playing music. And it happened so many times. And that's why I enjoyed sessions last night, you know, because for me, that is where presence is. That's where it's at, right? So for you, wherever it's at, find it and go there. If it's participating in groups like this, great. It's fun for you. Lovely. But just remember, it's nothing special. This is just what you like to do. Okay? If you like to do it, do it. If you don't, don't. But don't think that this is the only way. You know, self-inquiry is a way. Pranayama is a way. Whatever it is for you, find it, do it, and be realistic about it too. You know? Always be realistic about it. All right, enough of my sermonizing, so we'll just chat now.
When you said at the beginning there was one of the first things your teacher told you, and I missed a word.
The list of things?
Well, the list was great, but
Yeah.
right before the list, it was something like
Is it practice intensively? I think you said.
Oh, learn to
Contentedly is what you said.
yeah, learn to live a natural and spontaneous life contentedly.
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 Contentedly,
Okay.
yeah.
So say that whole thing
Okay.
again.
Learn to live a natural and spontaneous life contentedly.
Contently. Okay,
Yes,
good. I
yes.
just missed that word. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And make the list again. I like the list.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good list.
Yeah, the vegetable thing.
Pay your bills, eat your vegetables, exercise, meditate, and love God.
Awesome.
Yeah. When Roy was with Yogananda, he would go visit him, and the same thing. He wouldn't go to ask him questions. He just went there to be with him. And he said they were walking around the grounds at Encinitas, I believe, and they were just walking, and then Yogananda said, well, do you have any questions? And since Roy usually didn't, he didn't think of anything, but then one popped in his head. And that was, how many of the saints and the sages that are in your book, how many of them are fully awake, completely and totally, like beyond it all? And he said, Yogananda came right back, not judgmentally, he said, not many. He said, so many of them are content to hang out in the bliss of God communion that they don't go all the way. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I'm sure that's fun. But always remember that yeah, you practice until you get that contentment, until you get that sense of oneness, but even that's not the end. You have to go beyond that, and that we can't talk about. That you just have to get, and when you get it, you know, it's just ha. And then you try to talk about it, and then you're like, this doesn't work. So, anyway, other thoughts or questions?
So Kriya Yoga, part of Kriya Yoga is meditation on sound, correct?
That's one of the techniques, yeah. Uh-huh.
And one of the things that characterizes Kriya Yoga is the Kriyas, which are these
Yeah.
involuntary, spontaneous muscle movements and stuff like that.
Well, okay, so there's a few things. Kriya Yoga itself, in the Yoga Sutras, which was a book or a text of sutras written somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 years ago by Patanjali, the second chapter is actually called Kriya Yoga. So anyone who practices from the Yoga Sutras is technically doing Kriya Yoga. And Sri Yukteswar said when Yogananda came to the West, he said, teach yoga from Patanjali. So that's one of the reasons it's got its name. Now, most people who associate with the brand name of Kriya Yoga as taught by like SRF or CSA, the organization I went through, is this particular practice of pranayama, pulling the current up through the spine, allowing it to ascend back down. Now, what we always have to remember is the full definition of Kriya Yoga, which is one of the reasons I brought this book. It's not just that. It's basically, it says, it's self-discipline, self-inquiry, and surrender. That's what the first sutra in the chapter 2 Kriya Yoga is. It says, intensive self-discipline, self-inquiry, and surrender are the practices of Kriya Yoga. So it becomes more of a lifestyle thing. But what you're talking about, yes, that's one of the branded meditation techniques that we use.
not something that the Yogananda group recommends?
Oh, they recommend it, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's recommended. It's just, it's what they say, you do this, you get that.
So have you been with any teachers that do Shakti part?
Not in the sense of officially. Like, for example, when I'm with Mr. Davis, and again, he's not one to make a deal about this at all, and I try not to either, but I remember one time I went to the center, and I got up really early, 4 a.m., and I started meditating because I was supposed to meet him at 6 a.m. He's a very early riser. He goes to bed at 9, he gets up at 2. He writes, he exercises, he does his work, does it all over again, very disciplined fellow. And I remember I got up, and I was like, well, I'm going to be very into it. So I meditated, and then I met with him for a couple hours. And then I went down to the office, and one of the office workers there had just gotten this toy for his kid. It's called MindFlex, which is like you put on these devices, these electrodes, and it reads your brain waves. And the thing you got to do is, if you can concentrate very well, get into a super conscious state, it blows a fan, which makes a ball spin, like rise up. And so based on how you change your mental state, it makes the ball go up and down, and so it can go through little obstacles. So it's like mental training for kids. And I remember he hooked me up to that, and after meditating, and after being with Roy for a couple hours, I couldn't get the ball to go back down. I had to think about stupid stuff, and I had to fragment my awareness to make it go back down. So there is something, but it happens with anyone who's just clear, right? It has nothing to do with anything special. And in Vasishtha Yoga, there's like these gatekeepers of liberation, they say, and they are basically self-discipline, contentment, company of holy people, and my interpretation of holy people are just good, supportive people. That's it. And then self-inquiry. So if you do one of those, you get the rest. That's kind of neat.
I appreciate your simple and straightforward message. And I have a big garden, eat a lot of vegetables. Yesterday, I was challenging someone who was speaking around in setting intention, meditation, and they were yelling bullshit. And I just wonder, what do you think of people who talk about awakening without thinking that it's necessary to have intention or discipline?
Let them wait around and see what happens. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, sometimes you do have spontaneous experiences, and that's why I got interested in this stuff, because when I was a kid, when I was in high school, when I was in college, I had these things, but I didn't know what they were, And, it's just it happened. I was like, well, this is great. And then I'd come back down. This is great. And then I figured out that there's an actual process that you can go through, that if you don't want to wait for it, you can make it happen. It sounds very forceful, but it's not. It's like, well, do you want to be like an Olympic weightlifter? All right, we'll start training. It's the same thing. These people become masters, not just by sitting around. Because, again, even Ramana Maharshi, even though he had his awakening experience, he still spent 30 or some years in a cave meditating and reading these books.
So one other thing. So somewhere at some point when I was finding sitting meditation too unpleasant and challenging, I read about Buddha saying there are all these different ways to meditate, and I started meditating in bed, and I was falling asleep and waking up, and of course there's walking meditation.
Right.
Just curious your opinion on meditation as a life versus meditation as a particular behavior.
I think meditation as life is great, but I also think, again, that it's really good to have periods of intensive training. Just like I go to the gym and work out really hard for about 40 minutes. I don't do that forever, but I do it for 40 minutes a couple times a week, and that helps me stay strong. So the same thing. And Lahiri Mahasaya, one of the teachers in the Kriya Yoga tradition, what he would say is, you just do it, but you don't do it expecting anything. The real way to practice Kriya Yoga or any of this is you just do it. You don't expect results. You're not thinking, oh, I'm going to be enlightened. You're just doing it, and then you naturally mature. And that's what this is all about. It's not about anything more than just growing into what our potential is. There's a book called Cosmic Consciousness. Any of you heard of that book?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was written in the early 1900s by a doctor who interviewed all these normal people who had these cosmic conscious experiences. And what he found is that as a person goes through life, it's like there's an evolution of consciousness. Like the human organism represents, like there's the infantile stage where it's all about me, right? And then there's the adolescent stage where it's just, frustration and figuring yourself out. And then there's the adult stage where you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's what happens. And so it's the same thing. Consciousness evolves in that way, but most people get caught up, stuck in the adolescent stage or the infantile stage. And these processes help them, hopefully, grow into what they're meant to. Because we all are. We all are.
Is there anything that helped you with the discipline part?
So when I heard, if you do this, you'll get this, and I wanted that, I said, I'm getting up every morning and I'm doing that. So for me, and this is something I tell a lot of people, you just have to kick your own ass. You just have to make yourself get up and do it. But the thing is the more you do that, it becomes enjoyable. I didn't like it at first, but now when I meditate, I go right into it, and I can stay there for a long time, and it's fun. It's like getting in a hot bath. So it's learning to just train yourself to be there, and you just have to do it. Just make yourself do it. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Make myself do it. Yeah.
You do. Well, the real thing, the only way you can make yourself do it is if you figure out if it's important to you. If something's important to you, you'll do it. We all do the things that are important to us.
Well, it's kind of a comment. You can tell me if you think. I think you wouldn't disagree with this, but the training that you recommend, I'm sure, is appropriate for a lot of people. But I also think that part of the essence of awakening, if you will, is to sort of recognize like everything all the time as you're just walking around during the day as. Now, I say consciousness itself, and now there's like a debate in the avant-garde out there about even consciousness, isn't it, or whatever. That's fine, but for me, like recognizing everyone here, nature, the window, the light, all of it as myself, as consciousness, experiencing itself, that in itself is sufficient, I feel, for myself through my life to kind of to have that peace and joy that previously deluded me. And so, and I do meditate occasionally and stuff, but I do think that, I guess it's just a completely happenstance thing. Some people don't need any practices at all, and that's where they're at, like just deeply appreciating this whole realm as it's happening. Other people need more constant kind of reminders.
Right.
Is that, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any path is wrong as long as you are intent and know what you're doing, But going with that, the whole recognizing thing, that's great. And I remember when I first got introduced to the whole Advaita, Vedanta, and self-inquiry, it was a book by David Frawley, and he talked a lot about Ramana Maharshi. And my wife, she must thought I was crazy, because I immediately printed up all these little reminders. Who am I? Is this me? And I put them on the mirror, I put them on my coffee cup, I put them all over our apartment, because that was helping me to do that. But the thing is, though, with that recognizing, what I have found is that, again, personally, when you reach that state of clarity through possibly meditation or whatever it might be, that naturally happens. Like, it's not something that you make yourself do. It's like, I remember one time I was sitting at a friend's house, and she lives on a lake, and I was just sitting there. I forget what she was doing, walking her dog or something. And all of a sudden, the sound of the birds, I wasn't aware of them as though they were the sound of the birds. And I saw light on the water of the lake, and I wasn't aware of it as light there. I just thought, it was just me experiencing myself. That happened naturally. It wasn't something that I forced myself to do.
So say that phrase I like again about the contentment thing.
This is good. I like her. See, she's focused.
What's the question? Meditating.
She said, say that phrase again.
Oh.
Learn to live a natural and spontaneous life contentedly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now with that,
Yeah.
contentment, I think there's the key to what possibly what you were just saying, Trip, is that if you are recognizing and somehow you're finding a way to be in the world and be in a meditative state,
Right.
be open to expanded consciousness while you're living your life, and you've gotten to this point where you think, well, I don't really need to meditate because I'm just here and I'm part of all of this, and that somehow I'm in this expanded state of consciousness, or whatever recognizing is, because I've read the book. Then if you are content, then say our phrase again.
Learn to live a natural and spontaneous life contentedly.
Okay, so if you're living a natural and spontaneous life contently,
Yeah.
I think contently, maybe I misunderstood that word because that's kind of a key to a lot of things here. If you're content with what you're doing and you're not unhappy,
Yeah.
then if you have true contentment, then maybe you really don't need to meditate.
Right. No, you
But
wouldn't be
there's
here.
not a lot of people that aren't really content.
That's right. I agree.
Didn't you say that if you do one of those things, that you do them all?
If you do one of them, you get them all.
Okay, so let's all say that together.
What's what?
If you live
If you
a
live
spontaneous,
And natural life.
natural life,
Content.
contented.
Uh-oh, it sounds like
Say it
religion here.
again.
We're changing.
It's not spontaneous anymore.
Yeah, that happens all the time. That's first Jesus, then Buddha. Can't. It's human nature.
In 45 minutes.
But we're not here to become content. I think most of the people here are content, and we are here to share that joy that we have found. And that's one of the things that's good about this gathering is that we're not aspiring to become something. Most of us here, quote, already found that happiness, and so it's a joy to be among people who are not unhappy, grinding away. And it's not that it's not perfectly joyful to be out in our ordinary lives, and that's where we are. But it's nice to get a respite from the kind of I don't know, unhappiness that is kind of prevalent out there, and to be amongst people that just want to share that joy. So I think that.
Well, if that's the case, why are we talking about all this?
Huh?
I said, if that's the case, why are we talking about all this?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I think it's endlessly fascinating.
Okay.
To see each perspective on this coming through someone's unique experience.
Right.
It's just a beautiful window into it. It's just like a different piece of art.
Okay. I follow you now.
Well, and I think there's so many different paths for me being here. I've been exposed to different perspectives that I was not aware of before. So,
Yeah. Okay.
I want to talk about vegetables. And I heard a doctor say once, and this is not about spirituality, but I think that doctor was pretty spiritual on public TV. But he was saying that these vegetables are healing and prevent disease. The trouble is we don't eat them. And we eat all that other stuff that causes disease and creates, So I just think vegetables are really, like you read that list and people like chuckle when you hit vegetables.
Right.
Like it's a joke. Like it's what God gave us to put in this body, and that's all. He didn't give us, Twinkies and, buttered popcorn and all that stuff. So,
Well, I mean, going with that, yeah, even Ramana Maharshi, when asked about what are some good supports, he said a sattvic diet, which is basically vegetables. If you need anything, that'll do it. And speaking of that idea, like we have a body, right? That's what we're doing. And I remember Mr. Davis told me one time that he got an email, because there's this idea in yoga, spiritual practice of yoga, that if the moment you die, you bring your awareness up here, that you'll pop out of your head and you'll just enter bliss. You'll immediately wake up. And someone sent him an email saying, well, how can I know when I die that I will wake up? And he said he only had one answer. He said, well, wake up before you die. But later on, we were having lunch, and he was talking about retirement. And like I said, he's 81, I think 81 now. And he's still touring, not too much, but he's still touring, still does his retreats, still writes crazy amount of books and periodicals, still on his schedule. And he was saying, I don't understand why people retire. He says, you're always going to be somewhere in the infinite, so why would you just sit around and not do anything? And it's the same thing with the body. Whatever your state of consciousness and whatever you are right now, if you were to check out right now and your consciousness was going to continue, it would start over right there. So keep in mind that if you have a healthy body, that will continue, right? And Yogananda, he even said that if you're ill, if you're unwell and you die of a sickness, he said, don't let that enter your mind. He said, make sure that internally you are healthy, because that's what you'll carry with you. I know that's a little esoteric and out there, but it seems to be a true statement. If you want to do that.
Through the years, I have. It just makes a lot of sense, and it's easy to share a love and a bliss
when you feel well.
Yes.
You know, when you feel strong, and then I do think that there's always this possibility that, or that this is sort of a path, or this is one way to maybe go about it. And once you do reach a certain state, or you do it enough, maybe even if you do feel crappy, you still can maintain that bliss.
That's right.
So it's, in a way, it's a path, and it's a definitely, if you're ill and you're out of shape and you feel, it's harder to share joy. I mean, if you're not joy itself, and we are joy itself, and if something's pulling you out of that, and your body can do that at times.
Right.
Again, there may be people that are far enough along that are unaffected.
Well, it's not far enough along. It's just training, right?
Or it's where it is more natural,
right,
safe for them, no matter what.
Right.
Is maybe a better way to say it.
Yeah. There's a couple of principles you can apply to that. When I was learning to write, I got Stephen King's book on writing, and there was a great quote in there that said, "Inspiration is for amateurs." So you don't do something just because you're inspired. You do it every day, and then you get better at it. One of my teachers said, always train, always practice like you were going to compete. So you don't want to half-ass it. You want to do it exactly how you're going to do it, because when you're out in the world, that's how you're going to do it. And if you're able to function at that level, no matter what's going on up here, no matter what's happening, you can still consistently do it because you've trained yourself to do it. You know.
I noticed self-inquiry was part of the practice.
Yes.
And I know you're skipping over it, and
well,
God, I've heard so much about it.
Yeah.
Today. I just want to go home. Almost.
Yeah.
But
me too.
But when you, then maybe I'm going to make you sick.
No.
Because would you just briefly talk about what that is for you?
Sure.
And how you've experienced,
Right. So the self-inquiry part, the way it's been taught to me in regards to the yoga and meditation is that you do these other things first. Make your body healthy, get your mind in shape if it needs to be, go to counseling if you need to. Because again, yoga is not meant to be psychological therapy. It's for people who are not beyond that, but at a state where they're able to kind of deal with that. So once you practice meditation and you're calm and you're clear, then all I do is I just kind of be aware, as they've all talked about, of what is aware of this. So I'm sitting here, I'm meditating. Who is meditating? All right, and slowly I start to pull back, and I start to realize and feel that I'm not this body. Okay, I'm not the body. I see my thoughts, I see my emotions. Okay, I'm not my emotions. And you keep going. I think about my history, like where I have been, who I like, who I don't like, the things that I do. And I see, well, these are just my story, and so I pull back from that. And eventually, once you've labeled everything enough that you know that's not you, then it's just what's left. And then all you do is just sit there.
The light goes out, and you're...
That's right. And then you're just there. Right? And that's taking that to another level. Like if you're a devotional type, which I'm typically not, but it can be helpful. We all talk about loving God or loving each other. And the thing about meditation is that so often people sit there and like things are bugging them, and they have this idea that if you're sitting to meditate, it should be blissful and perfect. And yet, if they're sitting there meditating and they're focused on God, God right now is the feeling of this body. God right now is the sound of the elevator. God right now is the fact that I'm hungry. God right now is just whatever it is. And so if you really love God, you would love that too. And then it's okay. Right? And then that's when it just settles, and again, you're left with what you are. So my approach to the idea of self-inquiry is, yes, doing what everyone here, most people here, teach, but to going beyond it to where you're just being yourself, right? Just like right now, you're yourself. Nothing wrong with you. You're fine. No, I don't know. But if you can love it, then again you're loving everything, and there you go again, back into it. And it's always coming back into it. I was talking earlier with, let's see, she's not here, but a friend of mine in Nashville invites me to all these talks. It's like, oh, this non-dualist is showing up, this yogi is showing up, and I go to half of them and I leave halfway through because I've heard it before, and they're saying garbage, and he gets mad. And he said, I sit through all your talks. I said, you don't have to. It doesn't matter to me. There's a movie coming out called Kumare. Have any of you heard of this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I read about it on the New York Times, and it's a story about this Indian guy who was going to do a documentary on yoga gurus, like yoga gurus. And he's Indian, so he went around to all these yoga gurus, and he's like, man, these guys are just talking, they're just saying crap. Like, there's nothing to what they're saying, it's just garbage. So he grew his hair long, grew his beard long, got a flowing gown, got a trident and a picnic basket, and he went around giving talks, just making shit up. And people fell in love with him. And in the clip of the movie, I was like, I just can't believe he gives his time away, and I've had these transformational experiences. I mean, really sincere stuff. And you're thinking, wow. But the point is at the end, he turns it into a nice spin. So he's not just being a jerk. He's saying, you know what? You had these experiences with me. It has nothing to do with me. This is all you, right? And so I can't wait for that movie to come out. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, time's up. So
Okay.
see how easy it is to fall in love with Ryan?